Your planning committee. Item 2, apologies, please, Clark.
Councillor Younghead, Councillor Dorgat and Councillor Malcolm.
I think we're a full house otherwise, aren't we? Right, members' interests. Any disclosable interests for anybody? Kevin? Councillor Parker, sorry.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I've got an interest in the first one, 0273. I know the person concerned regarding that application, so I'll withdraw from the chamber and take no part in that.
Thank you. Don't forget, if anybody else has an interest, if you find you have an interest during the meeting, all you've got to do is register. Party whipping arrangements. Members of the public, that means we don't get together in political party lines to decide how we're going to vote. We listen to it and we all vote independently. There is one application that is a delegated approval, which is the very last one at Brixworth. It's 1076, the number is, and it's approved because the parish council objections have been removed. They've removed them themselves, rather. We haven't removed them. There's a few items of housekeeping, which I'm sure you've all heard before, but if the alarm bell rings, please go out orderly the way you came in. Please switch your devices to silent, he says, checking his own, because if not, the chairman of the council is here and she collects £10 off you if your phone rings. Or if it's not too bad a ring, it's £5. The proceedings are being recorded. Speakers will have 3 minutes, and after that time you'll hear a tone and be asked to wind up. And that will be the only opportunity for the public to speak, so appreciate if you don't interrupt during the rest of the debate. I'm sure you're not going to, but please don't clap, hiss, boo, cheer and stand up and wave your arms. You will see officers talking at the same time as members of the public are talking, and it looks incredibly bad manners. It's to get the answers of the points you're raising at the time. Right, we'll go to the first application, which you didn't sign the minutes of the last meeting. It's you which we signed as a correct record. Members?
Agree.
I totally whipped by that one, thank you. Totally inefficient. Now, there are two applications on for Overstone. The way I intend to deal with it is we will talk about both of them at the same time. So the speakers have got 3 minutes. They won't have 2 lots of 3 minutes, but I should be a bit flexible perhaps with the 3 minutes to speak about it, and then we'll vote on the 2 applications separately. So the first application is in Overstone, and so is the second. So if you'd like to present both of them.
Thank you, Chairman. Members may recall this site, the building, a Grade 2 listed building, which was subject to a major fire some 18 years ago in April 2001. Before the fire, part of the building was used as the New Testament Church of God and another part for sheltered accommodation. Since the fire, the building itself had fallen further into disrepair following the fire and vandalism. The applicant purchased the hall 3 years ago and have been in extensive dialogue with officers regarding its restoration since purchase. Following negotiations with the current owner, an application was submitted to the council for the restoration and conversion of the hall to 16 dwellings. This includes rebuilding of the outbuilding into garaging for the units. There are a large amount of works which are highlighted in the officers' report. Officers consider that this is an in-principle decision. However, despite repeated requests to the applicant to have to take a phased approach to the restoration, which would allow for a full structural survey to be undertaken, the results of such survey would have provided a very valuable information to enable the full extent of the restorations required to be determined. The applicant has employed a well-respected structural engineer who states they cannot carry out a full structural survey until the building is made safe. This would be through the Phase 1 stabilisation plan, which, as members will note by the extensive list of conditions required containing the late representations, that condition is recommended for the works to cease once the Phase 1 works have been carried out. This approach has also been recommended by Historic England for the phased approach. Members will note that whilst the recommendation before you this evening is to approve, you will further note from the report that there are a number of uncertainties regarding the actual restoration and conversion of the hall. The recommendation to approve is finely balanced, but having regard as to the potential further deterioration of the building, and with the application before committee being the only applications being made since the restoration of the hall, it is considered that it is in the best interest of the building to progress as much as possible successful restoration. This, again, has been a finely balanced decision. It has been a very serious source of disappointment that despite repeated requests to the applicant for a phased approach, as previously mentioned, the application had failed to engage with the advised approach. Given that the application had failed to follow the request of the applicant officers, it is therefore a finely balanced decision to bring the application before you with a recommendation for approval. However, as you're aware, members, you are fully entitled to, having read the report and listened to my presentation, to either defer the application to allow for the suggested way forward of officers to be brought forward by the applicant, or alternatively you may decide to refuse the application in its entirety on the grounds that the application has failed to deliver the requested phasing approach, and consequently you may consider that there is not sufficient information before you to enable you to make an informed decision on the application before you for the restoration and conversion of the hall. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Deb. That's what you've got to say on both of them.
Yes.
Thank you very much. Can I remind speakers then that you're talking on both of the two applications. You haven't got two separate 3 minutes, okay? So first of all, Mr. Charles, who's against the application?
Thank you. A lot of councils get themselves into a terrible mess with these sorts of applications. To avoid that, English Heritage published a guidance document on how to deal with them. And here's a copy of it. I explained in my December objection letter how it all works. In terms, it says don't grant consent to anything until you are able to weigh up all of the benefits and all of the impacts, and you can properly balance them to make a decision. It's designed to stop you from going down a route of trying to save a building one way, finding that the impacts are much worse than you thought, but having closed off other options that might be better. Here you're being told by Barry Howard that a concrete framed block of flats inside the shell of Overston Hall is the only solution. We don't agree. The experts at the Built Heritage Consultancy, whose report you've been sent, say it's only a marginal benefit. It isn't a restoration using traditional materials and techniques, and although it'll be jolly swish for the people living there won't be any public access and it won't be the same as it once was. 52% is new build. The impact comes from the 270 units of enabling development Barry wants to build to fund the £20 million deficit on the flats scheme. We don't know where 210 of those are going to be, but the first 60 or so are proposed at the entrance of the park opposite the church. You aren't being shown that application today because Barry Howard knows you would be horrified by it. A massive new housing estate built inside the park, with 210 more still to be found. You have to remember that the park was there long before the current hall. The park has as much, if not more, heritage interest than the hall itself, and in amenity terms, the park is an important green gap and amenity resource for the residents of Overston. The heritage experts at Built Heritage Consultancy say that ruining the park doesn't balance the marginal benefit of the flat scheme. The problem with consenting the flat scheme is that if Barry makes a start on it and puts the concrete frame in and then abandons it, you will set off down a route that is the wrong route, and finding a home for the 270 units of enabling development becomes the council's problem to solve. and other options become more difficult to deliver. Historic England in their consultation response are also telling you that Barry Howard is going about this the wrong way, and it's not just me and it's not just the residents of Overston that have turned up this evening and have put up ruined posters outside their homes. The option that the experts at Built Heritage Consultancy support is a safe, community ruin with public access. It might cost about £1 million to stabilise the structure, and that could be funded by just 4 or 6 large houses in the park, and we think a location could be found for those without having anything like the impact of the 60 or the 270 units proposed by Barry Howard. So we say, I can just continue for one more minute, the planning application for flats should be refused for the reasons set out in my letter on Friday. It's premature until you know what the impacts are going to be. It's not deliverable because of the £20 million deficit. It's contrary to the principles of enabling development, and it does not represent a viable long-term solution. And what it risks is putting the building in an even more vulnerable position in the future and prejudicing other options for the long-term preservation. If you do want to take a positive step today, the listed building consent could be approved to allow a start on the enabling phase 1 works that will facilitate preservation of the building, but these should be subject to a condition that work must stop before any works that are done that commit you to going down the flat scheme.
Can you wind up now, please?
Yeah, and that will be inconsistent with the community ruin scheme. And work shouldn't proceed beyond that unless and until the applications for enabling development are in front of you and enable you to make a balanced decision about all of the impacts.
Thank you. Thank you very much, sir. Mrs. Sharp, the Parish Council.
Speaking everybody, I'm speaking on behalf of Overston Parish Council. Barry Howard Homes have always stated that Overston Hall will be restored to its former glory. This is a misleading statement, as the plans show that it will be converted into 16 flats. OPC is very aware of the dilemma DDC, Daventry District Council, has with regards to the situation concerning Overston Hall and its previous incumbents. Although the proposed development for 16 flats is the applicant's preferred option, the proposal will lead to a significant loss of the character, detrimental to the appearance of the hall, and will not reinstate the hall to its former glory. These are OPC's concerns, also highlighted by the reports from Historic England. For the information provided, OPC has considerable reservations about the ability of the freeholder and the applicant to complete the timely restoration of Overston Hall. OPC has reviewed the financial and programme information provided by the applicant and has considerable concerns about the financial, managerial and technical ability of the freeholders and the applicant to complete the restoration of the hall. OPC is fully aware of the requirement for a substantial enabling development to finance this restoration. An analysis of the submitted programmes reveals that they have no critical pathway, no key dates such as watertight and power on, leading to OPC's doubting the managerial and technical expertise or the quality and timely restoration of the hall. The applicant has failed to demonstrate the ability to fund and manage the development of Overston Hall, and these are fundamental requirements for this restoration and for the listed buildings. OPC is very concerned that Daventry District Council may award this application and award planning permission without the constraints necessary to ensure that Overston Hall is restored to the quality of a listed building and for the benefit of all. Historic England has expressed similar concerns, and OPC believes it is essential that the recommendations made by Historic England are followed by DDC. The planning application from freeholders to take out a bond for £30 million to complete the restoration to Overston Hall within 5 years of the award planning being granted. In addition, DDC would closely monitor the standard and timely development, ensuring that all obligations were met and fulfilled. And we would like to know who the councillor would be responsible for making those decisions. As the proposed development of the hall provides no benefit to the village and its residents, in fact it takes away the only walk available to villagers and their families with prams and wheelchairs to go past the church and up to the hall. A walk that has been done for centuries and is now impossible. Overston Parish Council strongly recommends that this proposal strongly objects to this proposal being put forward by the applicant. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The third speaker is Mr. Frampton, who's the agent.
Thank you, Chairman. In response to Mr. Charles behind me, the statutory duty is to preserve the significance of the listed building, not to preserve part of a listed building. And these applications have been submitted separately on a purposeful basis because they raise distinct planning issues from the application for enabling development. They raise issues of, is a restored Overston Hall suitable for the proposed change of use to comprise 16 dwellings? Are the physical works internally and externally, which are required both planning permission and listed building consent, acceptable? And if I was an applicant seeking planning permission for a change of use, an extension or alteration of a building, whether listed or not, I would not expect the LPA to say before considering the merits of that application that the LPA needs to know that the applicant has the finance available to undertake the works. In my opinion, the availability of finance to the applicant is not a material planning consideration to the merits of these two applications before you. Indeed, there will be many situations which members will be aware planning permission has been granted, listed building consent has been granted on other projects, but they haven't proceeded, and the availability of finance may be one of those considerations. In the context of Overston Hall, the issues of enabling development that you've heard from the last two speakers are for another day's determination. The need for enabling development, the location, the scale and design do not touch upon the merits of these proposals for a new use of the hall and the proposed external and internal works to the hall. Mr. Charles talked about prematurity. For prematurity to be a reason for refusal, there has to be potential prejudice to other planning circumstances. Consent.
So, whose phone was that? That just cost you money anyway. You carry on.
It doesn't cost me time, sir.
Don't worry, you won't lose time.
Consent for these applications does not fetter the discretion of this committee in the determination of any other application, such as an application for enabling development. In terms of the phased approach, as you've seen from the photographs, this is a substantial building. It is in a ruinous condition. The advice from the experts is we cannot do further surveys in that building for health and safety reasons until that structure is stabilised. If we could, we would have, but that is the advice from experts, and that is the advice that the applicant has properly respected. There is a condition on the proposed condition on the listed builder application, the condition 15, which requires a further review of the works after the phase 1 repair and stabilisation works, which Catherine has referred to. As with all developments, projects will not take place beyond the availability of resources. The phase 1 works will actually put this building into a better condition than it is today, where no action has taken since 2001. And in terms of sort of other uses, this premise has been on the market since May 2018 for a hotel, single dwelling, leisure club, offices. No use has been identified. This is the best use for the building, 16 dwellings. Yes, there's some intervention, but as a restored building, this is the most suitable use. And I ask members to determine these applications as recommended by the officers. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Been asked by local members to, you can see their comments of the two local members in your late representation. So the first two comments. So members, it's over to you. Councillor Jones.
Thank you, Chairman. I've read both reports and I know this particular property. And to be honest, I'd be quite happy to propose that we go with officers' advice on this one. I do agree that the most appropriate use of this building is either as one or preferably more residential units. It has no really conceivable commercial value. And I agree with the district council's business surveyor on that point. Hotel, leisure, all the rest of it. It's just not viable to do that. I mean, even this development wouldn't be viable with 16 flats either, but that's beside the point. We're not here to determine the viability, or even to determine whether the applicant can or cannot afford to carry out the works, but to judge these applications on their individual merit. So I would rather see some attempt made to restore this building so that even if it is less than half of the original structure, which the report points out, I would prefer that than to see the alternative, which is simply to let it fall down even more, deteriorate even more, and also become an ongoing liability. So I'm quite happy to propose we go with officer's advice.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. Do you have a seconder? Would you like to speak now?
Can I wait, Chairman?
You can reserve your rights.
Yes, thank you.
Right, and you, Councillor Frost, you...
Can I ask some questions?
Andy?
First one, for the monitoring officer. We all know that ordinarily each application has to be judged on its own merits, but I don't see how that's possible in this case, because one can't happen without the other. So the first thing is it reasonable in this case to take application 275 into account? Because, well, I realise normally it wouldn't be, but how can you talk about one without talking about the other? Because one can't happen without the other.
Through you, Chairman, each application is taken on its own merits. Potentially, the enabling development may be refused, and therefore, sort of, we're in a position. Sort of, you have to look at the principle of actually the conversion and the restoration of the hall. Maybe there may be someone else who could actually come around and fund the hall itself in entirety without potentially any enabling development. But then again, at the same time, as how do we actually know any development is going to go ahead for monetary issues? Each case is taken on its own merits.
Okay, but following on from that, wouldn't it be smart of us to insist by trying to defer this that we understand what we're agreeing to? So to me, they're the wrong way round. If one is going to provide the finance from the other, then we should be debating 275 first of all, and if the only way that we can bring that about is by deferring this, then wouldn't that be the smartest thing to do?
That would be an opinion you're entitled to have.
Yeah, just to clarify, in an absolutely ideal world, it would be best to have this and any related applications on the same agenda for consideration at the same time. But there is no technical reason why this application can't be judged on its own.
Are you aware, do you know why, you must have asked, in which case I'd love to know, why the applicant hasn't put them all at the same time? Because it looks as if it's almost being done.
The applications were submitted all at the same time. Now, potentially, this one, as mentioned in my preamble, that there are still some holes in it, but in order to further progress or restore or have some works to the listed building to stabilise it into for its future historic use, that it's thought to bring this forward now. The other application is not quite ready to come to committee for members' consideration.
So was it at your suggestion that this was done in this order then?
We've got to determine applications sort of as and when in an ideal scenario we would like to bring them together. Again, if members did consider to defer this application tonight, there is a potential that the applicant could appeal against non-determination, because there is, or we turn the application within a certain time frame, and there is an agreed extension of time to deal with this application, but that is running out shortly. So following that, if that falls away and the applicant doesn't agree another extension of time, then the applicant has the right to appeal against non-determination. So yes, in a sense it's a catch-22 situation.
Yeah. Okay. Councillor Evans.
Yes, I am a bit puzzled because some comments were made by the speakers. It's a great listed building. It may be in disrepair, but when you buy a listed building, you have a duty of care for that listed building. So that listed building, by essence, cannot be fallen even more than it has. So I think my problem I have, I think what my previous member said is absolutely right. In the perfect world, we will have both applications at the same time because it would be better for the people of Overston to see and to make their representation all at once for the park and the hall, because it's sad that the park wasn't listed at the same time as the hall. But there, putting aside the fact that the hall is in that state, it should, whatever, we could defer the application because by nature of the listing, the applicant has a duty not to have it getting into further disrepair. Is that a correct understanding of the law?
Thank you, Councillor Evans.
Yeah, no, through you, Chairman, yeah, no, in the sense that there are potential ways around, such as we can serve urgent work notices and things like that, but that's also a potential of costs and everything else like that, so everything's got to be weighed up. So, again, this is, at the moment, the only application before us since the fire for its restoration. And although, yes, as I mentioned, again, that there are some holes, hopefully, by allowing this application as a whole, even though we do want it to be more of a phased approach, that something will happen to the listed building for its restoration.
Thank you. As a member that's been on this committee for 30 years, I remember the previous owners of this building coming along to this committee, and which was a church. They've been paid out the insurance money, but instead of spending the insurance money on repairing this building, they spent it on buying another building. And that way, this building ended up in the current ownership. So I just thought I'd tell you that, out of interest. Councillor Wesley, I think, was next.
No, sir, not at the moment.
No? Okay. Councillor Frank.
Just another question, just on that front, the health and safety argument, can you just clarify that one as well, the validity of it? We were told earlier that we need to approve this application effectively on health and safety grounds because that's the only way that an inspector can get up there. Well, it's a bit like my colleague over here said, well, if you buy a building, they're not breaking any laws, are they, by making it safe? I mean, right now, they don't need to wait for an application.
For you, Chairman, they will need listed building consent because potentially what the works that are required to stabilise the building in order to perform the further structural surveys which is required to actually assess the impact can't be done until that stability.
Without the consent, yeah.
Without that stabilisation works. So it's like a chicken and egg situation in the sense that with the building and getting the further surveys, the building is in such a state that they're potentially falling masonry and everything else. This conservation strategy has been done by the applicants by a renowned structural engineer in line with health and safety guidance as well.
But are you aware of any inhibiting factors that are preventing the making safe of this building? In other words, were listed consent to be applied for to make it safe, can you think of anything that would be used as an impediment to that?
No, potentially we are as officers, we are comfortable that if a phase one approach was for the stabilisation of the building itself, that it would be likely to be approved. But again, that would be subject to an application being taken on its own merits.
Thank you. Right.
Yeah, just to clarify, we've got a range of powers as the local authority. So previous to the current ownership, there was some break-ins and some community safety issues, and so that we actually took works and required we took action, we did some works, we required the previous owners to put fencing around and make safe. So we have got a whole range of powers about physically ensuring that there's no health and safety problems or community safety.
So in the event that this wasn't approved tonight, those powers could be brought to play to ensure the building is made safe and therefore facilitate the survey that.
And also the applicant's agent is here tonight to consider and are hearing members' concerns about the building, so can also relay those back to the applicant.
Thank you. Councillor Smith.
Yeah, we're uncomfortable, which is understandable. It's unfortunate that we've got this structural survey. One of the points have already been covered. But the fact that we go to phase one and the building is made safe so it can be properly looked at, I take a degree of comfort from that. It can't go any further until that work happens. So we kind of, from what Councillor Frost is saying, hopefully we'll fast forward this process to at least getting to that point. What happens after that? Well, who knows? We haven't seen the report. It would make it much easier for us if we had got the report, but we haven't. So we have to judge it as we are.
Thank you. Councillor Wesley.
Thank you, Chair. I came to the meeting in a bit of a quandary on this one, and I think I still am, if I'm honest. The thing that really worries me is tipping on the balance here, but as with all planning applications, if we give a consent on this, for me that always opens the door and enables the principle. I'm correct in saying that, aren't I?
Enables the principle for
for further development, for opening further doors.
What, for enabling developments?
For any ongoing developments and any opening, i.e. once we've given a consent, then that gives a step into that, which actually then gives the principle of the consent, which allows you to actually then come and say, well, I'd actually prefer to do it like this. We've already given the consent, and then it becomes more difficult to say no to anything else.
That's correct. As I said, each case is taken on its own merits.
But if there's an existing consent there, it's actually hard that you can actually only ever go back to where you were.
No, in the sense, we've got a building here, in the sense and the application before us, we can only determine the application before us, is for 16 units. Now, they're in initial conversation terms with the applicant. It was greater, they lessened that to enable the impact from the heritage asset better. But again, if there are changes, that would have to be subject to a different application.
Yes, indeed.
So, but yeah, the principle of, we're saying potentially the principle of conversion is acceptable, but and the impact on the designated heritage asset is less than substantial. But to get it restored, again, it's finely balanced, is an important stepping stone for getting this listed building restored. Now, the other thing is this is a listed building, so there's more stringent rules and regulations regarding if there's any changes.
Okay. Councillor Ritchie.
Thank you, Chair. My sort of gut feeling to start with is that it would be much better for this building to be back in use and sound condition, rather than it being a ruin that is going to be left to become even more of a ruin as the years progress. But having said that, there are just so many questions around about it. I noted that the parish council representative talked about changes being detrimental to the appearance of the hall. One of the officers could spell out that if this work did go ahead, I mean, obviously there are going to be changes internally, but to what extent would there be changes to the exterior of the hall? Other than barely putting it back together again. Can I possibly have a question?
No, if you look at the state of the building, the conservation officer or the engineer's report states that 48% of the building will be retained, 52% will be new in a sense. So there's always going to be changes in the sense it's a restoration as much as possible to the external appearance of the building. Yes, there are some alterations to it, but again, the nature of this sort of size development, you've got to consider those changes and the impact and the restoration of the hall itself. Yes, it's not an easy thing to undertake. You've got to have a look at sort of what it looks like, and it's going to be restored pretty much as possible.
It would be restored as much as possible. Clearly, it would look like an old building that has been restored. I mean, that will be inevitable. But it's the extent to which there is a view that there would be such a serious loss to its its historical aspect that would trying to put these into words. Looking at the photograph, clearly you can't rebuild it as it was several centuries ago. But to the extent to which it would be considered detrimental. I'm concerned that there has been the talk of that the restoration would need to go on alongside another development that would provide the money to cover it. A figure of 20 million was mentioned. 30, wasn't it? I appreciate as the agent for the applicant put it that the application should not be dependent on whether or not anybody has got the means to actually undertake the restoration. But I'm left at a bit of a loss as to how this actually for anybody would make economic sense. If that is the cost of the restoration, these are going to be very, very expensive flats to create. And I don't understand what is in it for the applicant. And I know that is not actually something that is a question about planning. But it just seems to me
to be interrupt you a second?
Yeah.
To explain to you that the third application, which is not here, would be about getting the money from, let's say, a development that probably shouldn't be where it would be proposed to go, to actually part pay for this as well as what is accepted will part pay for it. So what you're looking at tonight is not what will pay for it out of this application, but what may pay for it out of the next application.
So in other words, because this is a listed building, this what's been put forward today is a proposal for restoring it. It's going to cost a lot more than any retail value, commercial value of the finished product. So if the question then comes when the other application comes forward for enabling development, it says we are going to allow X hundred houses here where we wouldn't normally allow them. They would probably not have, it would just be perhaps an application in the open countryside or somewhere else that isn't in policy, so that where there's enough uplifting value and then that money then enables this building be restored into perpetuity because it's a heritage asset. So that's how that works.
You may argue that it's nothing to do with us as a planning committee, but there is clearly some deal that somebody is trying to strike behind the scenes, and that makes me exceptionally suspicious.
This is not relevant, Chairman.
If it was true that it included the development of houses.
I'm afraid it is, as the councillor said, irrelevant, that fact. So carry on. Sorry to interrupt.
It is irrelevant, but these issues have been raised, and you have given us an explanation yourself, Chair, that make me just rather anxious about this. I feel that I could not actually support this without actually knowing one hell of a lot more about what actually is the full plan and what is intended. There are a lot of questions I would have, as I've said, about the extent to which the hall can be brought back into some sort of use without destroying its historical aspect. But I think I'm far more concerned about the nature of the deal, and I think that without knowing that, I would find it impossible to support.
Thank you.
As I've mentioned before, in a sense, yes, we have got an application for enabling development for the phase 1 of the restoration of the hall itself. Now, that is going to be taken on its separate merits, and just because members may wish to grant permission for this doesn't mean that the enabling development side would actually get permission. Again, Overstone Hall, yes, is, and its setting around the parkland is important, and that is a consideration that as officers, when determining that particular enabling development scheme, will have to consider, and whether the harm to the area is outweighed by those benefits or not outweighed by those benefits. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor, I have Councillor Irving Swift next and Councillor Champlin.
Yes, Chairman, not that I want to do your job, but we have heard quite a lot and we have a proposal. So, which I will vote against it, I said already, my view, because I think the officer at the beginning said we could defer and try to have the two proposals, which I think would be better for the applicant and for the public. Not that, and I say...
Your suggestion, I'll go to the vote now.
Yeah, but also if you get to the vote and and the vote is successful, could I ask one little thing? You have a section 106 for that application, and there is a little thing about the library, and as you know, it's close to Moulton, so if the money is put, that is not put for the Northamptonshire Library, but for specifically for the library in Moulton, if that is possible. I know it's very minimal, but if the proposal is accepted, could we have that pinpoint for the library instead of having for the general library? Because, as you know, in a couple of years we will have two council, two unitary, and that might be more difficult.
I'm sure we can answer that question for you.
No, if you notice in the report, there is a recommendation for section 106,
yes,
and libraries is one of those.
Yes. Yes, but it's for the general body of the library, and I would like to have the library name.
Okay.
If that is possible.
It is possible in section 106.
It is possible, but we have to make sure it meets the test about reasonableness and everything else.
Please.
I mean, that's the first question. Have we had enough debate? Should we go to the vote? I consider that we haven't quite covered it yet, but we're nearly there. I think it's important that we hear all the views of the councillors that wish to say something. Councillor Champlin.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm rather shocked to have heard some of the things I've heard said this evening. Members must bear in mind that they are asked to consider this application on planning grounds alone. There is no, the enabling development that people talk about is not a material matter as far as these applications are concerned. The funding of this is not a material matter as far as this application is concerned. This application is about the permission or not to restore and reuse Overston Hall, which is a responsible ownership of a listed structure. I can see no technical reason for deferring this application, Chairman, none at all. We have enough information to decide whether or not, on its merits, this application shows a sensible approach to the restoration and reuse of this building. I hope that members aren't going to make a decision not having read all of the documents. I know there are a lot of them, but you did need to read them all in order to know enough about this application to decide it. If you haven't read them all, then you don't know enough. You haven't seen the amount of work that's gone into the planning of this particular project. So I would urge members to bear in mind that if they make the decision for non-planning reasons, they open themselves to assault from legal representatives of the applicant, who will decide that this was not done in a proper manner. So bear that in mind, please. It's been necessary for a number of years to find a way of preserving and restoring this building, and at last a proposal has been brought forward which has actually got a lot of merit to it. And so I think we should make sure that we make the right decision based on the information provided and not on our prejudice. And the other thing I would ask people to bear in mind is that just because you have permission to do something doesn't mean to say you're going to do it straight away, because you might have other reasons for making detailed plans of operational matter. This is a matter of permission. Should this building be restored and reused? Yes, it should. Is this a sensible way of restoring it so that it looks in its original form from the outside and that it becomes a useful building? Yes, it is. Mention has been made of the lack of public access. When it was a private dwelling, it didn't have public access. You could walk up to it and round it and view the outside, and that will be possible after this project if it goes ahead. So I would it will, because so in that case, can you be quiet, please? Thank you, Chairman. You did ask them at the beginning, but they seem to have forgotten. We may have to ask you to clear the public from the meeting, Chairman, if they're going to interrupt. We need to make a sensible decision based on the proper information that we have, and not on our speculation as to what might happen elsewhere at some other time.
Thank you, Councillor Chandler. You wish to come back and
it's just a question following on from this, because for me this is an important one. The core of this is should this be looked at as Councillor Chandler says in total isolation, or should we or can we take other things into account? And on that front, I've just got honestly one last question. In the event this is, my concern is that there's a circular argument that could be coming into play here, and so my question for you guys is, in the event that this is passed tonight, is there a risk that when 275 comes along, that the fact that this has been approved on January the 30th will be used to strengthen the exceptional argument, and that they'll say, well, There isn't, okay.
No, that application will be determined on its own merits and weighed in the balance.
That's separate.
I think, through you, Chairman, if I could just come back to a number of points that have been made. I think there's been lots of discussion about how this is going to be funded. But in planning terms, that's not normally a question we would be asking on other applications in terms of the work. Certainly, I don't think this should be a question we would be asking in this application. To pick up a point which you raised earlier as well, to require some clarification about the stabilisation works and whether or not that could be carried out separately from the current application. Equally, whether or not that as a listed building application could be determined separately from the planning application too. And the question to that is yes, an application for the stabilisation works could be carried out and submitted as a separate listed building application. And if members wished that to be clarified before determining this application, to provide more clarity as to the extent of the structural works, which was mentioned by Mr. Charles earlier, then that's something I think members, if they were looking to defer the application, could seek to do so on that particular point.
Mr. Chairman, could I make a proposal for that?
And we've already got a proposal that you just about to vote on. If that proposal fails, I will take your proposal, sir. Okay, I'm going now straight to the vote. We have a proposal the application be approved, which has been seconded. All those in favour, please show.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Those against?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
Right, that is lost. Right, now your proposal, sir.
Just that.
Well, just what?
That it be deferred to allow for this survey to take place. Because it seems ridiculous to me that the requirement for the survey is being used to shoehorn a much bigger one through. The two don't overlap. If there's health and safety stuff that needs to be done, then let it be done. It doesn't need the 16 flats to cover health and safety stuff.
Point of order, Chairman, we've turned this application down. That's the end of it.
So, through you, Chairman, we actually have to make a decision and we have opposition.
We haven't had the second way round.
Yeah, a proposal has been lost, and at this council we always have to get a decision in the end. So that was a lost proposal. Having listened to the debate, I would suggest, Councillor Frost, that your proposal to defer it hinges on not only wanting more information, but also wanting the application to come along with its enabling development. That's what you were talking about before. So is that your proposal? Or not that I wish to put words in your mouth, but I'm going by the notes just made.
Sorry, we're asking a question. Are we allowed to propose that this survey take place? Or is that not up to us?
In the sense that this application is for the whole works. Now it's talked, as I've mentioned previously, that there is a condition for works to stop. So potentially if you worry that you haven't got enough information to actually determine this application, i.e. you would like to have further surveys or a phase 1 before you consider the whole application, and potentially you may want to refuse the application.
On reflection, can I drop my proposal?
Okay. Right. Going back to where we were, we've had the proposal to approve the application turned down. Now, if you want to go the other way, to refuse the application, you've got to make a proposal for that. It doesn't mean that you've got you with planning reasons for it as well. It doesn't mean because you've lost the first one, you automatically refuse it. So you've got to go a proposal to refuse it with planning reasons. Okay? Just because you voted against it being allowed doesn't mean it's been refused. So you now have to make a proposal that it be refused.
At this council, everything is an actual decision, not a negative.
Yes,
it's a positive decision, whichever decision it is.
Right, Councillor Swift, you put your hand up first.
Yes, our officer shows us a way forward in a way that we can defer for more information. And that maybe is the best way for us. I have heard was Councillor Chandler say, but I think as the officer explained, that application is part of a solution. It shows quite a lot of positive things, and we should not forget the positive of that planning application. And because I remember that for new members, we had a full council, we put some money in reserve for Western Hall. So it has been a building of concern for that council for some time. So what I would like, if it's possible, is to propose a deferment where officer can speak a bit more with the applicant, see if there is a way out of that. And after that, if the applicant is minded, maybe be able to bring a full application even with a part, because I think that will alleviate all the concern and we can have a better proposal at the end. For me, to do something that is better for everybody. And I can understand fully what Councillor Chamber was trying to say to us in an undiplomatic way, but in my diplomatic French way, I will say that maybe a deferment might be the way forward, if that is possible.
Thank you.
We just need to know exactly what you're proposing. What are we deferring for? Is it
for more information?
For more information.
For the stabilization of the building of the work for the listed structure.
So is that just to clarify?
For the phasing.
For the phasing, is that to come alongside the enabling development application or not? I'm just asking that question because that has come up a few times in the debate.
So, and also in the sense that potentially, the applicant may not wish to carry out that phasing, so we might be in a position which, again, as I mentioned,
and we all know the applicant has the right to appeal. So I know the risk I am taking by, I have been a long time on the planning committee. It was not an easy decision to make tonight, and not an easy call. And I think the applicant, having heard in the query we were, and also the officer, you made a statement with your opinion, your professional opinion. I think with what has been said, the phasing seems to be the sticking point, and I'm sure the applicant will take that into account.
Can you give us the wording of your proposal then, Councillor Swift?
But we can tidy this up.
Yes.
Well, no, I think members want to hear it first.
Well, I mean, as long as it captures phasing and the survey work.
Yes.
So the stuff that's missing that we've asked for in condition, you'd like to see more of that.
Chairman, we need to hear their planning reasons for turning this application down.
Well, it's not really turned.
No, because
The reason to proposal to turn down, the proposal is I'm asking the proposer to make the proposal clear.
I propose a deferment to allow officer more time to discuss about the phasing with the applicant.
Right, so how are we going to word it then, Maria?
I'm going to cheat and ask Vanessa.
The onus is on you.
I would suggest that the deferment of the application to enable the applicant to provide the previously requested phasing information that can be compiled and brought back to 4 members to enable them to make a comprehensive decision on the application before them, having due regard to all necessary information. Furthermore, members may like to consider at this point, added to that the application is brought back together with the enabling application that allows them to consider all of the facts that affect the application to restore Daventry.
Which is on the line of history in England.
Can I ask you a question? Does the applicant still have the right to go for non-determination?
Yes, once
That's fair enough.
Yeah.
Right.
So I think we've captured.
I know the risk,
Right, so you've made a proposal, Councillor Swift. Who's seconding that proposal? Councillor Smith. All those in favour, please shout.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
Those against?
1, 2, 3, 4.
5.
So Chair, through you, is that together with the enabling application?
That sounds very against.
No, we're only voting on the first one. I told you we would take two separate votes.
Yes,
But
So
that's the first
that was the first application. Now we go to the second one, which I need a proposal for the second one.
so for application 07.
Sorry, and this point about the enabling development, that's part of the deferral, yeah, to allow them to come at the same time. Okay. Well, I'll propose it.
You're proposing the same thing for the second one?
yes, we have to be firm.
Okay, and you're seconding it? Right. All those in favour of doing the same for the second one?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
Those against? 5. The application is deferred for the given reasons. Both applications. Okay? If you'd like a few minutes to go out of the chamber, we'll stop the meeting for a few minutes so that you've got the chance to walk out. Okay. Right, we move on to the next application now. Hopefully they'll go a bit faster now. The next one is 0701 and it's in Drayton.
Thank you, Chairman. This is an application for the construction of 32 houses, which 8 will be affordable. The site is on the former care home off Stapleton Road in Daventry. As you can see, from the pictures, it is in an unkept state and overgrown. The Grange daycare centre is adjacent. The hedgerow to the front will be retained and will be subject to a maintenance scheme as suggested. Concern has been raised regarding the density of development. However, given the character of the locality, it's considered to be acceptable. If you note by the site location plan, you can see the different types of development. Yes, you've got lower density to the east and higher density to the west and south of the site. In addition, parking has been raised as a concern. However, it is considered to be acceptable. Highways do not have any objection to the proposal, but would prefer 2 parking spaces altered. However, it's considered it will not result in a detrimental impact on highway safety, and conditions can be imposed. The Crime Prevention Design Advisor also has no objections. Members' attention is drawn to the late representations. The application is recommended for approval subject to section 1A being implemented. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Catherine. We have one speaker, Mrs. Bramble, Town Council.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. We opposed this application because we did feel that it was over-densified. Parking is an issue. There's a school opposite, and at school times, parking along there is absolutely horrendous. Often the police have to come along and police that area because cars are just abandoned everywhere. So our concern is we felt there wasn't enough parking, and whether this was going to push the parking out onto the road to make school times even worse than they are. The school is filled to capacity and a waiting list, so we don't know where the children are going to go to school. They've got very busy roads to cross if they go to other schools. I see that there is an amount, I believe, of 94,000 to be allowed to schools, and I just wondered, a question was whether that would go to the neighbouring school to put maybe a porter cabin or something like that if there's room on the site to accommodate the local children. So I'm pleased to see that you're going to keep the hedgerow and going to maintain that. That area actually was an older people's home for many years, and it was a wonderful site. Everybody used to love going onto that site, and the county council closed it. I went along to those meetings at the time, and it was put to the public then that these areas were going to be either not used for general housing. So it was going to be more like learning disabilities, people with support, and the public, because of that, the public went along that they agreed that it's going to be good use for the community. They don't feel that this is going to be good use for the community with only 8 affordable houses. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Local member is Councillor Dabbs.
It is indeed. Yes, thank you, Chairman. I went around the periphery of the site to those who would be most affected by the buildings. I don't think the general attitude was, oh, we're dead against this, but there were certainly concerns. The main concern that people had was the boundary hedge. Now, I know it mentions, I think it's conditions 8 and 9, that it will be maintained and be appropriate and so on. But the hedge is a mess, and I was just wondering what further clarification officers could provide that the hedge will be appropriate, the trees will be of an appropriate size, because most of the hedge, I think, my understanding is it was actually open. There wasn't any barrier there at all at some stage when the old people's home was open. And this hedge, I'm not sure is planted or whether it's just grown up naturally over the years. It's a complete mess and it needs controlling.
Through you, Chairman, as I was brought up exactly opposite this place on Tweed Close, I can tell you that it was indeed open plan for about 25 years. And then there was a 3-bar fence, and then there was the spike top fence, and then there was hedging to go with it. It's been many years since it was the original concept open plan, like the rest of the estate. But as a small child, yes, it was very much a community space. We played cricket on the green that surrounds that.
So that will be one of my major concerns.
It's been 20 odd years since it's been open.
But will it be kept properly? So it'll need to be trimmed. If you've got excessively large trees, they need to be removed. You need to have sensible sized trees in. I'm not a tree expert, but you know, you have people concerned with the overhang of the trees if they're too large.
Yeah, free chair, in the sense you've got tree maintenance, or you've got maintenance of the hedgerow. From my understanding is the hedgerow won't be individual ownership, it'll be part potentially of a management scheme which will be funded by the residents themselves to ensure that the hedge is maintained. Now, if it isn't maintained in appropriate things, there's also the high hedgerow legislation, and also there's residents themselves saying this needs to be done, something needs to be done with the area. But at the moment, yes, it is an overgrown site, and works do need to be done to maintain that hedgerow.
Okay, further questions. I'm not sure whether this is the right one, but it's a question on parking. I hear what Councillor Randall says. I'm not disagreeing with anything that she's saying. What I'm looking at is parking that is proposed within the site. Now that picture is far too small, but what I'm very concerned about is when you look along with the parking allocation and you match the parking allocations with each of the properties. Now I know there's comments within the report which I think highways have mentioned, that you've got some tucked away parking places and can maybe change. That is certainly a concern. But if you look along the top row, if we can just have a look at the top row on the plan.
I was just going to try and find the parking plan.
It was there a minute ago.
There we go.
This is the view. I'll make it bigger and we'll move around slowly.
Yeah, so if you can just bring the picture up a little bit. I'm not sure whether everybody can read the plots.
Yes, we can.
I mean, this maybe is not the best of examples and so on, but my point of view is that if you have parking spaces, you want them outside of your house. What you don't want outside of your house is your neighbour's parking space. So you can see on the first property there, I think it says plot 1, and then plot 2 is still outside plot 1. You've got one parking space for plot 2 outside plot 2. That's perfectly okay. Then what do we get? A tree. Why on earth have we got a tree there? Why do we not have a parking space for plot 2 right outside plot 2 and move the tree between plot 1 and plot 2? Because my concern would be you have an untidy neighbour who likes to have pieces of car on his allocated plot, and it's right outside your front window. And this is repeated throughout the estate.
Through Chairman. Now, if there's loads of parking spaces in the front, the purposes of the trees and soft landscaping is to make it more attractive, because parking in the front of properties is not normally agreeable in the sense that it's more car dominated. So to make it more of a vegetable and more of a softer area, you do the greenery in between. Now, if you consider that in order to mix it up a bit more, that potentially you're feeling that the plots could be changed around, or the parking plots could be changed around a bit more, the applicants and the agent is sitting here tonight and taking this on board. Potentially you could approve the application subject to receiving amended plans regarding that parking layout.
That would seem to fit with where I'm starting. And it's not just those few. I mean, I made a note, I'm not sure it was a correct note, it was on plot 22 where I thought there was only one parking space for it, but again, I think that it's other parking spaces probably.
Some of them do seem to have one.
Somewhere else, I suppose you might say. So that would be my concern, but I certainly agree with what you say, that if the plans could be re-looked at. And I think in terms of a practical sense, that if you provide some green space that somebody might decide is a parking space, it'll get used as a parking space and it'll end up being a muddy space rather than a green space. So I think you have to try and help the residents to be civilised within their own corner. Parking will be a challenge there because I'm sure there's plenty of parking that's been allocated, but it probably isn't going to be enough in the modern world.
Thank you, Councillor Downs.
I've still got one final point.
I'm going to say I fully support what you were saying about those. I looked at those first 5 houses, and the first 4, there are 8 parking spaces, but there are trees outside 3 of them. You could move them along so the trees were in between the houses.
I'm sure you can't get it right for absolutely all of the properties.
No, but you can get it better,
I think you can get it better than it is, so certainly that's quite.
I agree with you.
My final point is there doesn't seem to be any comments on working hours on the site within the conditions. Is that an automatic thing or does that need to be specified?
Environmental health will tend to deal with the conditions regarding working hours. The working hours are pretty much set, and now if they are working outside those hours, it tends to be environmental health who leads.
Right, we don't have those put in the conditions then?
They're not as standard.
They're not always standards, no. In some cases we do ask for them, but in the majority of the cases you shouldn't impose conditions where other legislation states that they
Right,
deal with
so if
it.
residents have any issues that they should query with environmental health first to make sure that compliance is being made. Okay,
Do you try to make a proposal or not? I'm not putting words in your mouth.
Do I?
Do you want to support the proposal or not?
I will support the proposal with those conditions
With the
included
condition
on the car parking.
You make that a proposal?
Yes.
Thank you. Do you have a seconder? Councillor Irving Swift, seconded. Does anybody else wish to speak? Councillor Ritchie does, and yes, Councillor Ritchie can go first.
Yes, thank you, Chair. One or two things. The concern that has been raised by the town council is one of the density. I wonder if the officers can advise, making the usual sort of assumptions that you would about how many people occupy a 2-bedroom house. What would the figures be for density, and how does that compare with the other areas around about of the Grange? Is it Tweed that you've got alongside of the other parts of Sidings Road and so on?
Yeah, I mean it's because that was planned in the 60s and 70s. On the paper it looks like they're big plots and big houses, but they don't have bespoke parking. I mean, Tweed Close is not very well served with parking, and you can't. It's all double yellows on Staverton Road, so you park behind lots of other blocks of houses up there. So this is, if you looked at it on Google Earth, I'm just going to bring it up. It won't look similar looking down because it's modern design style. Smaller plots, smaller houses, but you've got your own parking.
So in terms
they're similar size plots.
In terms of people per hectare, or however you measure it these days, how would it compare?
Dwellings per hectare, in a sense, to be honest, I have not got that information before me. But however, if you just look at the site locate or the site plan, have a look how it fits in. Once we get there, that it is very similar density to other sites within sort of the Grange estate.
Okay. Well, look, I mean, there are 2 or 3 points I want to make. My second one really follows on from the issues that Councillor Dabbs has been raising, and yourself, Chair, about parking and where the parking spaces are. The parking spaces are outside, straight outside people's front doors. Are there going to be any restrictions on where they can leave a caravan or a mobile home or some other large commercial vehicle that they actually use? It happens in all the other estates, so there's no reason to assume that it is not going to happen here. And if that is outside somebody's front window, would there be any limitation that there would not?
Yeah, those tend to be on title deeds, when developers sell properties, estates have blanket approaches, but that's not usually done through planning. That is usually done when you're selling your house. You'll find most people, if you live in an estate anywhere that's been built probably since the 50s, it will say commercial vehicle parking in front of the building line, no caravans. That's pretty standard, but we don't. They're not conditions we could reasonably put on.
And additionally, it's through what's known as restrictive covenants, to impose no parking. Now, sort of to be honest, they're standard parking spaces. To be honest, it's unlikely that you get a caravan on these parking spaces, but then again...
Well, I would be surprised because I can't think of any other estate in Daventry where you don't have the odd area of where there is a caravan that sits for most of the year right outside somebody's house. It's not too bad if it's outside the house of the owner of the caravan, but yet it's detrimental to the outlook of neighbours. And I just feel that if the space is confined, then surely, if these things are going to be problems, this is the stage that we should think about them and look for a way around them. Let me move on to another concern. Officers will be aware that I have raised problems in another estate in Daventry, of where you have got 4-bedroom houses, and there are 4-bedroom houses here. I think.
Yeah, there are 3 spaces.
In which they are taken up by a landlord that then lets out room by room. Common practice here in Daventry, and places where you can easily get 2 people, get a couple, occupying each room, each with a car, potentially 8 cars in the one house. Now there are, I understand, there are. I cannot remember at the moment the precise legal instrument that you can use to prevent these homes being used as a house of multiple occupation. But is that something, I just see that as it has happened elsewhere, and it is difficult to roll back, that whether at this stage we should be much more restrictive, just to make sure that these are actually going to be there as family houses. And if it, while you respond, I mean, a final observation, and I know this often happens. I accept that I think it achieves the 25% of homes, of houses that are affordable. Is that right?
Yes.
Except if you look at bedrooms, it's only 10% of the bedrooms that are affordable. Admittedly, it says somewhere that there is a need for a certain number of 1-bedroom affordable homes in Daventry, but it also says there is need for 1, 2, and 3-bedroom homes in Daventry. It just strikes me that having the affordable homes all at such a low number, it doesn't. But I feel that in the spirit of 25%, it is almost looking for a way of circumventing it. And I feel too that it's unfortunate that this decision that the one-bedroom affordable homes will all be stuck into a cluster, into a terrace. It goes against the grain to me to have the idea that if you have affordable homes, somehow you have got to have them put in a little patch on their own, rather than being there for people who require affordable homes living with the rest of the community.
Catherine?
Thank you, Chair. With the affordable housing, the policy is 25% of dwellings shall be affordable. Now, the applicant has been in extensive negotiations with our affordable housing officer, who has looked at this, and also the scheme actually has been amended as a result of those discussions to meet the need of the Daventry area. So they are happy with what's being proposed tonight.
Sorry, who's happy?
Our affordable housing officer.
Is that part of planning policy?
Yeah.
And they have information about exactly what demand is and where the shortfalls are.
It may be, but that is different from saying that we are necessarily happy. All right.
In the sense it's policy compliance.
We make the policy, they comply with the policy. If we don't like what they do, we have to change the policy.
If I would like to come back on the other points, in terms of caravans, I'm not suggesting we put anything on here. It's not something we normally do in planning. All of this stuff is controllable. If somebody puts a caravan on their own drive or in their own back garden and it's not blighting anyone's amenity, then that's fine. But we can control caravans that are blocking out people's views, covering drives, covering up good parking, causing some problem. That we can absolutely deal with those, and we do. I can think of, they don't come up very often, but if people don't move them when asked nicely, we can take action, the police can take action, others can take action. So legislation is covered.
And separate from planning.
And similarly, HMOs, the regulations that changed last October, you only have to have 5 or more residents, 2 or more family units now to be called a HMO. So the scenario you're talking about would absolutely require licensing and registration and factors including, where are people going to stay. I mean, it all come into it. Having said that, it is a sustainable location. It's got both a local centre and easy access to the town centre. The buses go through there. And people may want to rent rooms out. In fact, with the housing demand as it is, there's nothing wrong with encouraging that. But ultimately, when you rent a room out, you need to know whether or not there's a parking space that comes with that. And so it's kind of anybody could have a 3-bedroom house and a family of 5 with them, they've all got a car. That happens, and it's about people being good neighbours, really. That probably covers all your points.
That's right.
And in addition to the highway side of things, our local or our highway authority consultant at the county has recommended that the parking provision is adequate for this type of development. So yes, it always happens to be the case where some houses have more than 2 cars, some have less than 2 cars. So in some cases, but unfortunately we can only deal with it on its own merits, and it seems to be acceptable in this particular case.
Okay, I'm going to take one more speaker, which is Councillor Wesley. You're going to go to the vote. Councillor Wesley.
Thank you, Chair. I think a lot of the points have sort of been covered, really. Generally support the application. I think it's probably the right thing to do. But I will come back to parking. I understand that highways say that the parking is adequate. I think the point raised about the parking spaces being in the right place is exactly the right thing to do. But looking at it, parking is adequate, but it's never ever enough. It doesn't matter where you're at, it is never enough. And it's quite a cramped site, and there's quite a lot of those green spaces. And I don't care what anyone says, you can go all around the town, and any green space will be used as a parking space and squeezed on under trees, next to trees, the wrong way around, and be difficult. And I think it would be far better to be a bit more creative with the parking and actually add more communal spaces in instead of the green areas. I know there's a certain amount of attractiveness at the moment on scrutiny, we're looking at parking issues in the town, and it is a major issue, and it almost looks like we're recreating another cramped-in problem again, when there seems to be at least a partial solution to providing more units of car parking space, and I would like to see that. I mean, one of the things that we actually look at on scrutiny was something called grass creep, which actually allows you to grow grass through concrete places, which could be the communal parts. And I've asked the developer to maybe look at that as well. But I do support the application.
Thank you. The proposal, the application be approved, it's been seconded. All those in favour, please show.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
Those against? Abstentions? One abstention. Okay, the application is approved. Next application is Line Gottlieb.
Thank you, Chairman. The application relates to the tax property, which is off the plan of the Long Gottlieb. Says that the lost space is taken Seeks the report that there are no neighbour objections, however the parish council has objected and have raised concerns that the Caprio balcony will result in overlooking. Officers consider there is sufficient distance between the Caprio balcony and neighbour properties in order to avoid any overlooking the lost privacy. As such, we're recommending the application be approved. Thank you.
I don't think it's not so Caprio. I have to look at it from that side.
So just to be really clear, when it's closed, it looks like that.
It
And then
doesn't chop ahead.
when you choose to open the window, you're very much opening the whole area. I've been in a show house that had them in, so they just look like a window when they're closed, but then they just pop open and sort of look like a balcony. And you would only be able to see from your shoulders upwards.
It's Romeo and Juliet.
Right, the local member has nothing to say on it. So can I ask somebody to propose that we approve it, please? Councillor Swift.
And you approve with a Caprio.
Thank you. All those in favour, please show. Thank you.
There's the blood running of her arm, she said.
Right, next one's in Walgrave, and it's 1003.
Thank you, Chairman. I'll wait for the bits and pieces.
I'm sorry we're so quick for you.
Sorry, I had a little break. Thank you, Chairman. This is an application for a change of use of a residential property in the village of Walgrave to a children's home. This will be for 4 children of ages between 10 to 18 and 2 carers which will be there 24 hours a day, but they will be on a rotating shift. Now, that is what makes it requires pretty much planning permission for a change of use, because it will pretty much be seen as a residential property, just that they would have shift carers coming in. So it's not like you've got a parent there all the time, or a foster carer, or a carer there 24/7. It will, as I said, will be operated like a family home. So where the kids go to school will be in local education. Refuse will be the same, it won't be a commercial use, such as having other commercial bin lorries coming to the site. Officers consider the application should be approved. It's on a large enough site and has got adequate parking. As you can see by the site layout and the photos, there is sufficient parking. It is noted we have not received an amended comment from the local highway authority regarding the parking space, but they have been notified. But certainly the parking plan does clearly indicate how 6 cars can be in and out, and given it's off its own private access as well. Therefore, the application is recommended for approval. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. We have 3 speakers and a local member wishing to speak as well. So Mr. Cooper, who's against it, is the first speaker.
Good evening.
Wherever you are, you're 3 minutes.
Good evening. My name is Jonathan Cupper. I live in Applegarth, adjacent to the paddocks. My wife was born in the village and we have 2 children under the age of 4. My wife and I come from families that have several educationalists and social workers, so we understand the needs of vulnerable young people. And we, and many villagers, firmly believe that the proposed location is not suitable. There is a complete lack of social facilities and amenities. To our knowledge, no other homes of this type have been established in such underserved communities within Northamptonshire. With social amenities so sparse, what will these young people be expected to do in their free time and school holidays? Young people should be encouraged to take up hobbies and interests to gain independence, but there is nothing accessible by foot in Walgrave. We have no shops, no doctor's surgery, library, cinema, leisure centre, sports clubs, banks, cash points, youth clubs, railway station, regular buses, cycle paths or police station. We also have an emergency response time significantly below the national average. The facilities such as they are in Walgrave suit primary age children. Parents in the village with teenagers overcome the public transport challenges to their own cars and an extended network of friends and family. These friendships are established through attending the local primary school. Any teenagers entering the village face the challenge of meeting new friends with a lack of socialising opportunities. The report states that it's little different from a relatively large family. This ignores the reasons why young people are placed in care and their needs. This is not to assume antisocial behaviour, but to acknowledge that 4 vulnerable individuals require an oversight interaction with local authorities and a greater need of the amenities that Walgrave lacks. The average age for leaving the parental home is 24 and 25, but these young people need independence by 18, which is impeded by the lack of amenities and regular public transport. Paddocks is in a quiet residential area, with the 3 immediate neighbours being young families with children under the age of 8, and an elderly lady living alone. The house is described as secluded, when in fact the rear of the house, the garden, has a low wall, and due to its elevated position is in full view of the field behind and the public footpath. We are concerned that the applicant's report does not consider or mention the well-used public footpath which borders the property. The footpath allows full view of the driveway and the front of the house and continues to the side of the property, creating a blind spot. The surrounding houses overlook the second floor of the house. The application does nothing to reassure villagers in terms of risk assessments and procedures specific to this setting. There could potentially be many more car movements than stated in the application, and I note, as you mentioned, that the highways report is still outstanding. I ask the Planning Committee please consider the 38 letters of objection, the objection of the Parish Council. These objections state reasoned concerns raised by villagers, parents and care professionals. The stark lack of amenities puts on an unnecessary barrier to positive outcomes for these young people. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker is Mrs. Eldridge from the Parish Council. Again,
Yes, thank you. I'm a local Walgrave Parish Council. I've been asked to represent the council and share their official statement. Councillors considered the application and they agreed to reject it for the following reasons. Walgrave Village is not compatible for this use due to its rural location and lack of local amenities, social facilities and public transport, especially in relation to the age group of the children, which is 10 to 18-year-olds. This proposal has incompatible and unacceptable use implications due to the local consideration and the feelings of the local residents. Thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. Mackenzie.
Yes, hello. Over here.
Sorry, I'm deaf as well as can't walk. Do apologise, sir.
So good evening. I'm Duncan Mackenzie. I represent TLC UK Limited with the proposed vendors for the property. I know from the report by the planning officer that the recommendation is for the application to be approved. In response to the objections to our proposal, we would like to make the following representations. The behaviour of our children is not a consideration in terms of the planning application. However, we will take the same role as any responsible parent already living in that community should this go through. In terms of the location, the home is situated ideally to accommodate children and young people who have experienced a high level of instability and chaos in their early years. The calming and rural setting of the paddocks and its surroundings lends itself perfectly for the purpose that we are proposing. It is noted that the main objection to our proposal is down to a lack of amenities in the local area. This has nothing to do with the planning application whatsoever. Secondly, although there are few facilities within the village itself, the surrounding villages, one of which I grew up in myself, are all within a shortcut car or bicycle journey, and they have an abundance of activities for our children to participate in, as the children who already live in the village do so. I'm sure that the current residents make use of these, and we would be no different. The children we care for have a large budget allocated weekly to facilitate participation in clubs and hobbies, more than I would argue than a normal family does. On top of this, there will be 2 vehicles made available solely for the use of transporting our children to these activities, no different to a family already living in a rural community. I'd like to emphasise again, this has nothing to do with a planning application, however. Educational facilities will be accessed in exactly the same way that children who already reside in the village do. We have met and corresponded with the community. Representatives have visited our current operation and spoke extremely positively about how well this was run and the homely environment and care that we provide to the children. After an extensive Q&A session in the local village pub just before Christmas, some of the initial opposition to our plan were actually in full support of it. It's important to note that the village has almost 1,000 residents. They've all been made very aware of our proposal, and only 3.8% of them have opposed to this. This, we believe, has also been down to misinformation and incitement from certain residents, and some of the comments made by the local councillor can only be described as totally inaccurate and unfounded. Again, none of this has anything to do with a planning application. We are fully committed to having a positive and proactive role in the community and have shared examples with the village of how we would do this. All of these were warmly received by the majority of the village. This approach has been proven to be highly successful in our current Ofsted Outstanding Rated Children's Home, and this is what we will emulate at the paddocks. We look after some of the most disadvantaged children in society, and this is no fault of their own. They deserve a nice, safe, caring and loving home and community to live in, and this is why we've chosen Walgrave and the paddocks. All of this has been carefully taken into consideration and account by the planning officer, who has recommended that this be approved.
Thank you, sir. Local councillor, Councillor Walden.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and the Planning Committee for giving me the opportunity to speak. I'm here to outline and evaluate my constituents' concerns about the application for the change of use from a family dwelling into a care home for vulnerable young people with immeasurable behavioural disorders. This is the most contentious planning application proposed in Walgrave in over 20 years. I've had at least 60 people contact me concerned about the proposal. Most local objections are based on concerns about the possibility of antisocial behaviour, of course, a disturbance arising from use, resulting in a negative outcome for both the residents and the young people themselves. The parish council meeting was attended by 40 people, which was extraordinary, as I have to say, most meetings are unattended. So I'm just going to review what a sustainable location is. For those that don't know about Walgrave, obviously you can see the pictures up on there. Walgrave is a small rural village with less than 400 properties and only 900 people according to the census. Apart from the morning and evening rush hour, it is very, very quiet. In fact, most people will say peaceful is the apt word. Social amenities are sparse, as has been noted, and in the last decade the village has seen a fall in those amenities further. The post office has now closed. The bus service has been cut from hourly to just 1 in and 1 out per day. It is not as stated in the planning submission surrounded by open fields, but is in fact working agricultural land with limited rights of way, with many fields populated with horses from 2 major livery businesses. At one edge of the village, there is a local game shoot. It has 1 primary school, and the nearest secondary school is on the edge of Northampton. I should also state there is actually a missing element within this planning application, that there is a public right-of-way exactly adjacent to the house. This is a almost hidden pathway where you can look into the property, so please be aware of that. That's not picked up by the officer. This proposal is not a family home, as inferred in the planning application. It's a privately run commercial business, staffed by a number of adults, 10 full-time, 2 part-time, 24 hours a day, as noted, on a rota system, offering support for, yes, crisis young people on a temporary basis, set in a purely residential area. This location is incompatible within the village and will most likely impact negatively with the amenities of the neighbours. I'm stating this because the planning application submitted is not accurate or sufficiently detailed, and I'd like to bring this to your attention. In my research, I've sought expert opinion, advice and evidence from a range of people, including care home owners and managers, the County Council Children's Services, police and other authority staff, and members who have had experience in similar planning considerations. For context, I would just like to defer and say I'm passionate about promoting good patient outcomes through my work with the NHS. One is a quality improvement manager, and in my other role as a specialist skin camouflage nurse working with young people who self-harm, many of which come from these homes. So I do take slight offence at what was said tonight. I've spoken to 2 managers of 2 different homes in Northamptonshire and the owner of a home in Bedford. I also visited a comparable home, in other words, one that will take 4 children with EBD in Long Buckby. Along with the member of the parish council, we talked to the managers and met with some of the young people. I'd just like to say Long Buckby is obviously 4 times the population and has substantial social and transport infrastructure compared to Walgrave, the proposed site. All 3 people told me, these are the managers, that due to the rural location, it would not be their preference to open a care facility there. One of the managers I'd like to point out is the ex-PCO of Walgrave, and another lived in Brixworth, so both know the village well. Their reasons, council, were unanimous. Simply put, the more opportunities for their young people to engage and access local amenities, the better, and ideally within walking distance. That would not be the case in Walgrave. This is to encourage personal development, plus access to public transport should be on their doorstep. They said the location was the most important factor for good outcomes. First, to stabilise young people, and then to get them to become fully independent. That is skills and experience to manage their lives when they leave, because they leave at 18. It's become clear that care home companies choose locations in small towns or on the edge of small towns, and not rural locations. I could not find a similar example to that proposed for Walgrave. Moving on to the impact on amenities for neighbouring residents. On the submission, the applicant said there would be a maximum of 8 core car movements per day. On reference 6.3, they indicated only 1 shift per 24-hour period. I'm not sure if this is actually a mistake. The rota system is very unclear and has not been clarified in the subsequent report by the planning officer. We also note in the report by the officer, and contrary to the initial submission, there will be supplied 2 company cars, as noted tonight, to ferry the young people. So the car movement estimate is now incorrect. Nowhere in the submission do they mention traffic movements of support, admin or ancillary staff, management involved in staff meetings, other agency staff, home education, social workers, PCSOs or other child support, who would be it would be a regular occurrence and dependent on the needs of the young person in that home. For instance, while I was at Long Buckby, there were 4 staff in attendance plus a piano teacher. Therefore, traffic movements are an unknown factor, most likely well in excess of a normal domestic dwelling of this size, so I take a case with the officer on that, and would likely cause undue disturbance and traffic movements over and above the regular family use. We should also ask, is there enough parking at busy times, and can service vehicles get in at that same time if required? From my discussions, I was also surprised there was not what is called a location impact risk assessment, which includes a community integration plan as part of the submission. This gives details on how helpful the environment will be to the young person's development, particularly access to the amenity. Other managers recommended that these are produced before a new home is purchased as part of best practice. The local PCSO was not aware of the plans when we met. There is also no indication in the planning officer's report that the emergency service has been contacted for their assessment of the suitability of a home in this location. Considering the substantial local concerns regarding the potential levels of activity, and more importantly, as the business is not yet Ofsted registered, the precise operational functioning of the use is not known. The business model noted in the submission may well change. Ofsted requirements could result in additional staff, a change in shift patterns or significantly more comings and goings, such as staff and visitor movements to support the specific needs of the young people chosen for the hut, all of which could generate unacceptable levels of disturbance to residents. Now, coming to the conclusion, this evidence I've outlined, along with the Parish Council's rejection of the residence letters we've received, leads me to ask you to consider refusing this application for change of use. However, Mr. Chairman and councillors, there is another option which is a compromise that the committee may like to consider. In my research, I became aware of some planning decisions for dealing with very similar issues. For example, in Chelmsford, the planning committee came to a sensible compromise to help the care home applicants prove that there would be not a detrimental effect on local amenities due to traffic movements, antisocial behaviour and disturbance. They granted a temporary planning approval for a period of 1 year to properly assess the impact of the care home on the fabric of the neighbourhood. Thank you.
Officer, do you want to come back?
I'd like to come back on a few sort of overarching points really, thank you Chairman. Just to be clear, this is a change of use, not a new build, so some of the issues around sustainability are going to be very similar. It's actually very borderline whether this even needed planning permission at all. It would have been permitted development, but we could have gone either way. But the deciding factor on this one was that if it was a foster family with 4 children resident, would absolutely not need planning. But because it's operating with rotating carers, then that slightly changes, and that's why we've gone down this route. But just to be clear, I'm aware of other houses, much larger houses that have converted under permitted development become places where up to 6 adults are in secure lockdown for having had severe mental illness, and they just went through on permitted development in residential areas, lots of concern at the planning stage, and 2 or 3 years on, absolutely no reports of any problems from police, through any of our services. So I just wanted to give you some of that context, and then Catherine will cover the other points if that's all right, Chairman.
Yep.
In a sense, it is very similar to a family home, as Maria has pointed out. The only reason why it tipped the balance to needing planning permission after discussion with the applicants is that it's the carers that have tipped that balance. So any person or any family could move in here with potentially 1 parent and 4 children, or with potentially equally they could have difficulties in themselves. Even potentially they could range from a large amount of different ages or using different facilities, but again the parents would take them to and fro places, car movements. In a case potentially, yeah, there may be more car ownership, but it is on a big plot. There is a lot of existing parking on the site. As far as I'm aware, that the Highway Authority actually haven't got an issue potentially with the use, but they just wanted more further clarification on the parking. They requested a parking layout, which the applicants have provided. Yes, we have not received their comments, but as officers, given sort of where it is, it's considered that is acceptable. Now, traffic movements again is probably very similar. Yes, it may be slightly more, but then again, some houses may have issues with, or not issues, but they may have a family where they've got children which have a lot of after school clubs, ferrying to and fro. As a parent myself, you sometimes feel like daddy taxi or mummy taxi, but it's something that it could depend on the family. And in addition, it's for the change of use only. It's not relating to the children, the range of children, or what's happening. It's not a new build in the open countryside. There's no external alterations to the appearance. It's there as existing, and as officers we consider the change of use is acceptable. It's very much like, in our opinion, a normal residential property, albeit with carers employed. Thank you, Chairman.
And while we're on the subject, I'll tell you, I'm not going to talk about Walgrave because I don't know anything about it, but I can tell you about, we have two of these in Longbutley. One we were sold 25 years ago and one we were put in 2 years ago. The one that was put in 2 years ago has a lesser amount of people. Again, it's in the cover, 24-hour cover. The problems we had with that, within the first week, a young lady of 15 put bricks through a genuine window because she had an attack of something. And we had problems with parking with Star. We resolved the problems with Star. We haven't had any more problems from that particular one since. The other one that we've had 25 years has been a constant source of trouble in Longbutley. You rarely go a week without seeing a police car outside. We're a lot bigger village than Walgrave, but I'm afraid antisocial things do happen, thefts happen, fights happen, a lot of things happen with local, and we have facilities in Longbutley, so we seem to, the way the parish council dealt with it was every time we get a complaint, and we used to get them very, very regular, we'd write to Ofsted and tell them of the complaint. And then when the Ofsted came to look at it, they would consider the complaints and then mark them up accordingly. I'm not talking about Walgrave, I'm talking about what Longbutley ones was like. Councillors of interest, then Councillor Richard.
Yes, with my other hat as a county councillor, as we are all corporate chairmen, it's very important that we give the best chance to our look after children and those living in Los Angeles look after children. Also, it is very important that the residents of the village can be reassured that it can be run in an orderly fashion. Some of those children will have very specific needs. Some of the children will never cause any problem. They will be like other children, and you will not even think they are look after children. It is what I think is very important is to be aware of the potential misapprehension or fear. And I think if it is possible, if we could give a year of a year planning application, and after that year, I'm sure the home will have had enough turnover of children if they are in short term, and reassure, work with the village to prove that they are really giving what the children need without any problem. I think that is a good way, and after there will not be problem. If, in other hand, there will be problem, they could tease them out and maybe become better. In any case, Ofsted will have their way. But I think it's very important that the councillor who represents the village has done a thorough investigation. The people who own the house, the owner is local and has experience. So together, with 1 year, maybe provisional things, and if there is no objection, will be rolled on automatically, might be the right approach. And I have to say, we need more houses like that in Northamptonshire. Thank you.
Is that a proposal or
It's a proposal, if that could be acceptable for the planning committee.
I think we need to, because we've never talked to the application is for this for a change of use.
Yes.
There's not been a conversation with the applicant. We're not having had a discussion up here. We're not sure that it would be reasonable to
I don't
impose
know
that
if it's
as a condition. So that if we did do that, that would be challengeable, could be an appeal. I mean, you've got to think that if somebody's about to take this property on and for it to become this effectively like a foster home, then they're going to be investing, getting staff, investing in the property, and that's, that's why we don't think it's probably going to be reasonable. It's either a suitable change of use or it's not really. To say do it temporarily may not be something we can support.
I'm sorry, can I say, if that is done in Bedfordshire and I have no no doubt of Peterborough. If other council do it,
We don't know, through you, Chair, we don't know the circumstances of that particular application. It might have been a property that was already owned by somebody, and there was less risk, and that was a proposal that they agreed. But it wouldn't seem fair to put the applicant in that spot now.
Sorry, would you be fair for the chairman to ask if the applicant will be minded to see that? And because I don't see any problem, if it's a good house, it would be no problem.
Okay. You heard the question, did you?
Yeah.
If you've got a
Our plan is to provide a home for these children. If I move a child in and say, you might not be here in 12 months, how secure is that? It's totally unfeasible, and I'm very surprised that an example of that even exists in this country.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks for your comment. Also, I'd like to say, a few minutes ago I gave 2 examples of 2 care homes in Longbury. I make no comment at all about Walgrave, and I don't intend to. That is the honest truth of both of them. I chaired that parish council for many, many years. Those are facts. That's not fiction. You can either use that or not use that. But I'm not there to bias you one way or the other. I shan't even vote on this application, so don't think I'm trying to bias you, because I'm not. Councillor Ritchie.
Can I start with something that's perhaps not quite so contentious? And I have a request that really applies to most of the applications we look at. We've seen loads and loads of photographs that flash up while the officers are making the report. Some of them look interesting, but some of us haven't the foggiest idea of what it is that we're actually looking at. So perhaps on occasions, but given that this is only a change news, perhaps it doesn't actually matter, Chair, in this case.
We'll give her 30 seconds and Maria will tell you what they are. Back garden.
That's the
back
access
gate.
drive.
That's the access drive.
That's the
Due to the neighbours.
yeah, that's the boundary treatment with neighbours.
Sorry if that's like proceedings.
That's the parking area that's existing with the existing building. Again, the boundary.
Well, thank you for that. I hear what you have told us, Chair, that you're talking about Long Buckby. I have no idea then why you're talking about Long Buckby. If you don't see it as having any relevance to this particular application. Of course, in homes and in families, look around the estates of Daventry. You'll find instances of children with problems, young people engaging in antisocial behaviour. Of course you have problems like that. Are we suggesting that Walgrave, or this committee, should be in a position in which we judge a planning application on the basis of who the residents might at some time in the future be? It seems totally wrong that we are even discussing these things. I'm sorry to hear that many parents in Walgrave think it is such a terrible place for bringing up children. I'd be interested to know how many of them are actually moving out of Walgrave to look for somewhere more suitable. There have been references to the views of some people who work within the County Council Social Services. Now, I assume that the way that a home like this works is that it provides a home to people who are referred through the County Social Services. I wanted to know if there was some way of asking, the county doesn't seem to have raised an issue with this, if it is aware of it, saying that there is no way that we are going to put vulnerable children into Walgrave, perhaps because of hostility. But I would finish by saying that something that at least gave me a lot of hope. The first part of page 79, the first half of that page, it made me feel good that there are actually people who in Walgrave that were prepared to write in and say that look, this is an outstanding opportunity to allow others the chance to be part of an amazing community and give the children a place where they can call home. And the importance of having homes for vulnerable people in our area and so on. But that is there. That seems to suggest to me that this is something that deserves our support.
Thank you. Councillor Wesley.
Thank you, Chair. I think Councillor Ritchie has pretty much covered my points. I think we've heard a lot of things about it. I understand residents' concerns, I really, really do. Nobody wants, you would be worried thinking you're going to have difficult people living next door in your village, but the fact remains, difficult people do live in lots and lots of places, be they in homes or not in homes, and you cannot predict who or how anyone is going to behave next year. So I think deferred time, the temporary time is out of the question. You can't predict how someone's going to be behaving in 5 years. Yes, it's a little bit of a change for the village, but what you have to respect is that, is it appropriate? Well, I think you have to respect the professional people in this who are actually going to try and do it. And at the end of the day, if it doesn't work, then it will no doubt close. That's not our decision. As to various opinions that it's not in the right place, well, have they looked at everything? I don't know. And actually, sometimes doing something different is perhaps the best thing to do to try it out. Maybe this is some sort of model to take it forward. If there's no other homes like this in the county, maybe it's the first of many. I just think we've heard loads and loads of things that aren't actually planning matters on this. And for me, I think we have to say, accept officer's advice and approve it. And hope, and I will say this, and hope that all of the other agencies within the county, the police, the social services, the district council or the new unitary will actually control any issues which will be affecting the village of Walgrave, because that is how it is policed and looked after everywhere else in every community in this district, not through the planning committee, unfortunately.
Was that a proposal?
I mean, I propose that we accept officer's advice.
Do you have a second?
I hope so.
Councillor Ritchie. Right, Councillor James, next.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Well, you know, I've listened to what presidents have said, and I've listened to what the local council has said, and I agree with everything that they've said. I know a lot about raising kids. I know a lot about raising kids in rural areas. I've been doing it for the last 45 years. I'll never get rid of them, and I've got the next generation. The difference is this. My kids have a loving support. They have things that they can do which are compatible with living in a rural village that doesn't have any amenities, that doesn't have any transport facilities, doesn't have any school. All it has is a pub that's dying. So, what happens to the rest of the children? Well, I tell you what happens. We've got nothing to do. We're bored, and they find something to do. And it's not what residents like them to do. It's very antisocial. And I fear that this is what will happen to Walgrave. It's all very well using this type of children. We now know, beyond the political correctness, often what children means. And I'm afraid if this goes ahead, Walgrave people will find out what children means. I do think it's wholly inappropriate in this location, in this particular village, to have this change of use. And if I were to suggest a reason for not going with officers' advice on this, I would say that it's a non-conforming user in a rural location.
Thank you, Councillor James. Councillor Chairman.
Thank you, Chair. I actually support exactly what Councillor James has just said. The notes I've made, which a lot of people have said as well, but to me, because I know Walgrave, we're only 2 villages away from it, it's just not in a sustainable location for those children. The village is less than 1,000 people. There is no facilities in Walgrave. There's a pub, which is, I think, going downhill slightly. But anyway, hopefully the children won't be using the pub. 1 bus in the morning and 1 late afternoon. The application is for a business. Let's get that bit right. It's not, as Councillor James said, about a family home. It's a different thing altogether. And also I take issue with the officer where he said a family could move in. The family, if they want to move into a village, it's their decision whether they want to move to that location. the children are not going to get, would you like to move to Walgrave? So I'm afraid I can't support it. I agree with the local councillor, Councillor Irving Swift, that I think you can take the emotion away in all honesty, to actually say, well, let's have it for a year, in which time Ofsted will have been in, also risk assessments would have been carried out, and the police would have been involved. It would then have to come back to this committee based on facts rather than anything else. It's happened at Chelmsford, it's happened at Peterborough, and I can't see any reason why we can't just put that condition in it. If everything's fine over there, then everything will be fine. But at the moment, we have not got certain reports, and I don't like making decisions on emotion. I want them based on facts. So I propose that that's what we should be doing. Thank you, Chair.
I can't take a proposal on that because I already have them. Yes. Have one. I've got 3 officers that wish to speak. First of all, Catherine, then Vanessa, legal lady, and Maria.
Okay, thank you, Chairman. Things have been raised about it's that the children have not got a choice to move into the property or go to Walgrave if that so wish. But then again, at the same time, sort of as parents, you tend to move to places that children may not agree with the location and may not actually like the location, but it's an adult decision. From reading sort of the supporting documentation with this site, it is clear in their report, that the children will be looked at to determine whether that property is appropriate for them. So it won't be anybody or anything. And in a sense, again, it's not a planning issue of who moves in, because anybody could move in and be a nuisance neighbour, regardless of where you come from, whether it is another family. We have got regulations, which I'm sure Maria will touch on in a minute, but we have to consider this on its own planning merits. And if members did wish to impose a condition regarding a temporary condition, you have to provide a good reason for that. I am not convinced that that temporary condition would meet the 6 tests, and it wouldn't be enforceable or reasonable to do that. Now, if you did want to put that condition on at any approval, then the applicants do have the right of appeal to go against or say they don't like that condition. But as officers, I am giving you that I don't think it's reasonable. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Catherine. Vanessa.
Committee, I'm playing my duty if I didn't advise you to cast from your mind any comments that have been made about any other resident of any other residential facility, whilst they are selling it, in good faith and well-meaning, they are not relevant to this application. Please cast them from your mind. Secondly, the behaviour, good or bad, of any potential resident of this facility is not a material planning consideration. So please do not take that into account.
Thank you. Right.
And I was just going to make it clear, as I've done before, that we have a really good track record at this council of dealing with antisocial behaviour and neighbour nuisance when it crops up. We can deal with individual cases, we can deal with hotspots, really good partnership arrangements with the police. Sometimes that's through environmental health, sometimes that's through our community safety team. But we, when these problems crop up, we have a good track record of solving them. So it's outside planning, but I wanted to give you that assurance that we have got the resources and the skills to deal with it. If there were issues, we provide mediation, we provide all sorts of support.
Thank you. We have a proposal that the application be approved and seconded. All those in favour, please show.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
Those against?
1, 2, 3.
4.
4.
Was it 4? No, put your hands up again. Those against?
Yeah.
3, you're right. Yeah. Thank you, brother. 7-3, the application is approved. Okay? application and drainage, and before we get on to it, it's only there for one reason, it's a staff application, okay? As it will be delegated normally, alright? Go with that, 30 seconds while they go. Right, next up again is item 1004.
Thank you, Chairman. This is an application for a replacement canopy and a porch to the front of the property in Cameron Close in Daventry. As you can see by the photos, there was a flat roof canopy before, and it's quite character of the locality, but also there is a character of the locality where they've actually got sloping. So this is for the replacement with a sloping canopy, which officers consider it to be acceptable, and the Daventry Town Council does not have an objection. Thank you, Chairman.
Could we propose to accept officer advice?
Sorry?
Propose officers proposed.
Or is that your ward?
Right, who proposed approval? Right, who seconded it?
Is that your
Hands
ward?
everywhere, you'll take it. Right, all those in favour, please show. As you're aware, it's only there for one reason, it's a staff member.
I think that was unanimous.
Thank you, that concludes that, that's unanimous. The next application is in Abbey North, and a very appropriate name, Road.
Thank you, Chairman. This application relates to a detached two-storey house at the end of a cul-de-sac, which shares a driveway with neighbouring property. The application seeks consent to construct a front porch and to extend the garage space, and also to convert the existing garage into a home gym. You'll see that there are no objections other than from the County Highways Authority, who consider that the parking spaces can't be accessed independently without causing a danger to pedestrians or other vehicles. Officers consider otherwise, as there is no need for the driveway to cross the public footpath, and the house at the end of a cul-de-sac, and as such there are no passing vehicles. We just want to refer you to the MPPN, which advises that if applications going to be refused on highway grounds, if they result in severe residual cumulative impacts on the road network, we do not think that this applies in this case, and as such we recommend it be approved.
Thank you, Catherine. We've got two local members here, Councillor James and Councillor Ritchie. Do either of you want to speak?
Yeah.
Both of you?
Yeah,
Okay.
just to say I'm quite happy with this application. I know I do those very well. Quite a little spot this. It's wholly appropriate, and I'm perfectly willing to propose it.
Okay, do you have a second on?
Yeah.
Councillor Ritchie, and you as well.
I would only comment that the application seems to be further evidence for the need for getting rid of the county council. I mean, it's totally, if you know that area, to say that there was a highway problem is totally absurd.
Well done for your compliment. No, not your compliment, your comment on the county highway comments. Thank you, Councillor Ritchie. That concludes the meeting. Oh, sorry. Do you know, I was trying hard. Right, we have a proposal to approve the application that's been seconded. All those in favour, please show. Unanimous, everybody. Thank you. That does conclude the meeting. Thank you for